Hello everyone, welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So my friends, I have repeatedly said for many months that Twitter is where intelligent political conversation goes to die a harrowing, meme-filled, surface-level death. A death that I would not wish upon my worst enemy or even the most malevolent forces upon this planet. That is absolutely what it is. And I think that this truth is illustrated perfectly in the right's response, a lot of people on the right's response to the abysmal, horrific Biden infrastructure plan. How so? Well, I will discuss the particulars of the plan in the first place. But there are a few, I want to say, proverbial phrases or adages that I think illustrate my point for me in the perimeter of what I'm going to say. So I'm going to draw from two phrases, and I'll get into my analysis. Emanuel Swedenborg, who is considered to be a crazy mystic who apparently talked to angels and got some idea of what heaven is about, is one of the most underrated, I think, philosophers in history. I do think that a lot of what he is saying is nonsensical and that, it probably shouldn't be taken literally, but he has said something that is so profound that all of you need to understand because it relates to the conception of our political discourse. He says in his book, Heaven and Hell, when he's talking about the general Christian idea of how the world is going to end, he says this. He says, "But for those who are so ignorant of the arcana that lie hidden in every particular of the word, for in every particular of the word there is an internal sense which treats of things spiritual and heavenly, not of things natural and worldly, such as are treated of in the sense of the letter, and this is not true. Only of the meaning of groups of words, it is true of each particular word, for the word is written solely by correspondences to the end that there may be an internal sense in every least particular of it." Now, Swedenborg's talking about general ideas of Christianity, and I don't agree with him on that particularly, but I do agree that the arcana, the sort of hidden aspect of every concept and idea, is being ignored by so many on the right when it comes to Joe Biden's infrastructure bill. There's also another phrase from the book of Romans that says, "Thinking themselves wise, they became fools." So those are the two adages that I want you guys to have in your head when I'm going to analyze this. So a lot of people were criticizing the Biden infrastructure bill, and because according to USA Today, it really only spends $621 billion on infrastructure, and it is overall a $2 trillion package. It spends $650 billion on quality of life at home. It spends over $400 billion for caregivers, which is childcare and all that kind of stuff. And it also spends about $480 billion on research, development, and manufacturing. And beneath these large blanket terms, my friends, are a lot of things which seem miscellaneous to the idea of infrastructure. So many people on the right, many libertarians, conservatives, have taken up the sword of derision to be used as a political weapon against Biden, and derision meaning mockery, and they have sort of quoted certain things that seem absolutely unrelated to infrastructure, or actually are unrelated to infrastructure, and have said, are these things infrastructure? So someone will say, "Oh, my hair is going every which way. Is my hair infrastructure? Oh, my podcast. Is my podcast infrastructure?" And they're doing this to try to highlight the absurdity of the broadness, of the wide breadth of the Biden infrastructure plan. That is fine. Here's what's not okay, though. That's where their critiques end. And when you do that, actually, it's not fine, actually, I take that back. When you do that, when you engage in mockery, as opposed to using reason, which reason is not mockery, reason shows if an idea is sound or unsound on its own basis, my friends. When we use our reason, that sort of third rung on the trifecta of our being, as Aristotle would say, that makes us human beings, when we use our rational faculties to expose ideas, the merits of the ideas will speak for themselves. You don't have to use derision to speak to these ideas. You simply need to use deconstruction in the real way, not the critical race theory way, but the real way. But here's what happens when you decide to derive these plans as opposed to deconstructing them with reason. Number one, when you say, "Is this infrastructure?" you're implying that you support Biden's premise. Biden's core premise is that the government has not just a responsibility, but a necessity to be involved in infrastructure. If you're saying, okay, we should, is infrastructure, you're basically saying we need to fund things that are related to infrastructure, and therefore you accept his premise, and therefore you betray libertarian and conservative values which are about small government, and you also give Biden in to do things with things that he can justify as infrastructure. That's number one. But number two, you also ignore the grotesque, egregious symbolism that is enshrined into the infrastructure bill. As Swedenborg said, the arcana. The arcana. So what is the arcana of this bill? My friends, the arcana of this bill is the idea that the government must maintain public roads, the government must maintain certain aspects of life, the government must maintain this or that, and it completely and utterly enmeshes the government to have this sort of ubiquitous authority over your ability to get from point A to point B. It is a kind of paternalism, because the bill itself rests on the presupposition that these things are not only best handled by government, but that they must be handled by government. But instead of actually critiquing this paternalistic symbolism, which is enshrined into the foundation of the bill, so many on the right are being surface-level nut jobs and simply trying to mock their way to victory. There is not a single great man on this earth who mocked his way to greatness or mocked his way to excellence. Having the government, having a bill that has been attributed to similar kinds of bills and initiatives like the New Deal and the Great Society, both of which sacrificed the idea of American individualism onto the altar of the public good, onto the altar of a deified government, what Lockwood von Mises would call etatism, statism, the worship of the state, right? Statism is simply a belief in the state's overall authority. Etatism is the sort of metaphysical understanding of the state and worshiping it as if this is a divine entity. FDR and LBJ both had etatist ideas of how the state should work. And this bill has been likened to the Great Society and to the New Deal, and we understand what permeated the New Deal. What permeated the New Deal was a sort of a lack of belief in self-reliance because of all of the terrible things like the Dust Bowl that were happening. And so FDR came in and exploited that. And what permeated the Great Society was this idea that it is the government's idea, and the government is simply coercion, that it is coercion's idea that to force and coerce itself to a better state of being, when in all reality there are still millions of people impoverished in America despite the Great Society programs. There are still millions of people who do not have these sort of Gnostic heavenly ideas embodied in their lives, despite the fact the government has spent billions upon trillions of dollars longitudinally to fund these things. My friends, this is serious stuff. There's philosophy behind this. You have to pay attention. You have to pay attention, because if you keep just mocking your way into political fights, what's going to happen when one of these intellectual, pseudo-intellectual people who knows rhetoric, who studied rhetoric, comes up against you in real life? What's going to happen then? Oh, well, I'll be more serious, Christian. Twitter's not real life. That may be so. But when our political discourse is stationed in a certain place, I need you to have on the sort of breastplate of righteousness and have your reason activated. Because there are just so many symbols. And hidden into this bill is the idea that you have no control over so many of these things that actually involve you. The roads, which involve you. You driving cars, which involve you. It quite literally tries to impair your agency by suggesting that we even need an infrastructure bill in the first place. The only reason why we need an infrastructure bill is because for the past 80 to 90 years, the government has been so intertwined and so enmeshed into the production of the roads, into the production of public transit. Public simply meaning government ran, government funded. And despite the deficiencies of these things, despite the inefficiencies of these things, despite the immoral methods of funding these things, despite the immoral methods, immoral symbols that kind of silently replace the individual or replace individual action for government action and these things, despite all of that, we're still accepting the premise as conservatives, as libertarians, that we need the government to do these things for us. We're still accepting the foul premise. And if you keep accepting the premise, you will keep getting the same results. Know what the arcana is, my friends. Reject the premise and stop with this nonsense. This bill is a malevolent bill. It calls up concepts from the bad part of the conceptual realm that I mentioned and makes them into law. What conceptual authority do you have if you accept the premise and are flippant about this instead of using your reason, instead of using philosophy to fight back against these things, you have no authority. Your authority is impotent. Don't be impotent. Be righteous. Think on it. As always, my friends, I love you, and please, if you want to support me, please, Patreon is a good way to support me. Patreon.com/officialcwatson or PayPal. PayPal is officialcwatson@gmail.com. I love you guys, and please, as always, stay pensive. Bye-bye.